Okay, just imagine this for a second. Think about a top predator from the Ice Age, an animal totally wiped off the face of the Earth for 13,000 years. Now, what if I told you it's back?
Well, that is the incredible, almost unbelievable claim from a company called Colossal Biosciences. They're saying they've done it. They've brought back the direwolf. You know, the animal made famous by Game of Thrones. Extinct for millennia, and now supposedly it's alive and well right here in the 21st century.
So meet Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi. These three little pups are right at the heart of this wild story. They're living in a secret facility somewhere, and they have no idea at all that they are the very first of their kind to walk the Earth in over 13,000 years. It's just wow. But before we get into how this even happened, we've got to ask, what exactly was a direwolf anyway?
See, for the longest time, we all just kind of thought direwolves were bigger, meaner ancestors of the gray wolves we have today. But then, a huge study in 2021 dropped a bombshell. It turns out they weren't close relatives at all. They were a completely separate branch of the family tree that split off almost 6 million years ago. Yeah, they were bigger, with a bite that could crush bone, but they completely vanished when the last ice age ended.
So that leads to the big question. How in the world do you reverse extinction? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? But scientists are actually tackling this problem with three main approaches.
So method number one is called backbreeding. A perfect example is the quagga, this really cool relative of the zebra that was hunted into extinction. Well, since 1987, the Quagga Project has been selectively breeding zebras that just happen to have fewer stripes. They're trying to bring back that unique look, and honestly, the results are amazingly close. But it brings up a huge philosophical question. If it just looks like a quagga, is it really a quagga?
Okay, method 2 is cloning. You probably heard of Dolly the sheep. Well, the first time this was ever tried for de-extinction was with a Spanish goat called the bucardo. Scientists actually managed to save cells from the very last one before she died. And get this, they actually created a clone. An animal was brought back from extinction for the first time in history. But it's a tragic story. The clone was born with a bad lung defect and it only lived for 10 minutes. The species went extinct for a second time. It just goes to show you how unbelievably hard this is.
And all of that brings us to the third method, the one that's a total game changer, genetic engineering. The key here is this Nobel Prize-winning technology called CRISPR-Cas9. The easiest way to think about it is like a find and replace tool, but for DNA. It lets scientists dive into an organism's genetic code and make these super precise changes. And that is exactly the tool that Colossal Biosciences use.
So, now that we know about this incredible genetic tool, how did Colossal actually create their direwolves? Let's walk through their de-extinction recipe step by step.
All right, so the whole thing started with what was basically a biological treasure hunt for ancient DNA, which they carefully pulled out of old fossils. And when they compared that genetic code to a modern gray wolf, they found it was a 99.5% match. I mean, that's incredibly close. The real trick was figuring out which genes made a direwolf a direwolf. They zeroed in on 14 key genes that controlled things like a bigger body, a wider, stronger skull, that kind of stuff. Then, using CRISPR, they performed what you could call genetic surgery on gray wolf cells, created embryos, and put them into surrogate mother dogs. And then, on October 1st, 2024, Romulus and Remus were born.
The science is just, it's mind-blowing. It's a huge achievement, no doubt. But this is where the story pivots, because it's kicked off this massive debate in the scientific community, all over one pretty simple question. Did they actually bring back a direwolf?
And really, the whole controversy boils down to this. We know the original direwolf and the gray wolf share 99.5% of their DNA. But is bridging that tiny little gap really enough to say you've resurrected an entire species?
You know, to really get why so many scientists are skeptical, think about this. Humans and chimpanzees, we share 98.8% of our DNA. The difference between a gray wolf and Colossal's new creation is even smaller than that. It's just 0.5%. And critics are quick to point out that packed into that tiny gap is millions of years of separate evolution.
This really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Critics are basically saying that what Colossal made isn't a resurrected direwolf. It's a genetically engineered gray wolf that's been tweaked to look like a direwolf. And, you know, that's a really powerful and thought-provoking argument.
So here's the bottom line. Colossal edited just 14 genes. A full genome has millions. That means the fundamental DNA of this new animal is still overwhelmingly gray wolf. It's a proxy, you could say, a look-alike. But is it a true revival? A lot of scientists are saying, no, not really.
And of course, this scientific debate cracks open a much, much bigger can of worms, the ethical debate. Because whether you call it a direwolf or not, the simple fact that we can do this now forces us to ask some really tough questions.
So on one hand, supporters argue that de-extinction could help us heal the planet, bring back a key species, and you might restore balance to an entire ecosystem. But then opponents raise some major red flags. The world has changed. The direwolf's original home, its prey, it's all gone. Where would it even live? And maybe the biggest point of all, with such limited money for conservation, should we be spending billions to bring back the dead when so many living species are about to disappear?
And that really is the central question, isn't it? This technology is an amazing testament to what humans can do. But it really brings us to a major fork in the road, forcing us to take a hard look at our priorities. Because while this project is focused on a creature that's been gone for 13,000 years, this is the number of northern white rhinos left on the entire planet. 2. Both are females, and they're too old to have babies. Their extinction is happening right now, in our lifetime.
And they are far from alone. A UN report warned that over 1 million species are threatened with extinction right now. And many of them don't need fancy gene editing or cloning. They just need us to protect their homes and stop poaching. It really drives home that old saying, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
So in the end, Colossal's project, whether you want to call it a true direwolf or not, leaves us all with this one profound question. Now that we actually have the power to edit life itself, how do we choose to use it? Do we focus our energy on recreating the ghosts of the past, or do we double down on our efforts to save the living wonders we are about to lose forever? The choice is no longer science fiction. It's ours to make.